The alarm did not sound like an alarm. It sounded like the whole station had forgotten how to breathe for 1 second, and then remembered all at once, screaming. I was standing in the customs line at Threshold Station with my hands raised, palms open, exactly the way the signs told me to stand. A blue light passed over my body from head to foot. Then it passed over me again. Then it stopped moving and just hung there, trembling, like it could not decide what to do with what it was looking at. 3 security drones dropped from the ceiling before I even had time to lower my arms. They were shaped like teardrops, black and smooth, with a single red eye each. They surrounded me in a perfect triangle, close enough that I could feel the hum of their engines against my skin. "Do not move," said a voice from the nearest drone. It spoke Galactic Common, but the voice had a strange, clipped quality, like it was translating too quickly to sound calm. "Biological scan has returned a level 5 anomaly. Remain still." I had been traveling for 6 months to reach this station. I had filled out the paperwork. I had the right documents, the right permits, the right reasons for being here. I was not a soldier. I was not a smuggler. I was a shipping contractor named Ethan Cole, 34 years old, here to sign a routine cargo agreement on behalf of a company that moved grain and machine parts between systems. That was the whole story. That was supposed to be the whole story. "There must be a mistake," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm not carrying anything dangerous. Check my bags again if you need to." "The scan is not of your bags," the drone said. "The scan is of you." That was when I understood, in a slow and creeping way, that something about my own body had set off every alarm this station had. Around me the customs hall had gone silent. A moment ago it had been full of noise, dozens of species from a dozen worlds moving through checkpoints, luggage sliding on belts, announcements echoing off the high metal ceiling. Now everyone had stopped. A tall being with pale blue skin and 4 arms froze mid-step, one hand still holding a travel case. A cluster of smaller creatures with soft fur and wide, dark eyes huddled together near a support pillar, watching me the way small animals watch a predator they are not sure has noticed them yet. I had never felt more like an outsider in my life, and I had felt like an outsider on a lot of worlds by that point. "My name is Ethan Cole," I said again, slower this time, trying to sound like a man with nothing to hide, because I genuinely believed I had nothing to hide. "I have a valid travel visa. I am here for business. I don't understand what the scanner found." The drone did not answer right away. Instead, a section of the floor, a few feet in front of me, split open with a soft mechanical hiss, and a taller unit rose up from beneath it. This one was different from the drones. It was humanoid in shape, built from dull silver metal, with no face at all, just a smooth curved surface where a face should be. A single line of light ran down the center of that surface, glowing faint blue. "I am Threshold Station Processing Unit 7, it said. Its voice was calmer than the drone's, deeper, almost gentle, which somehow made it more unsettling. "You will remain in place while I complete a secondary examination." "Of course," I said, because there was nothing else to say. Arguing with security drones has never once worked out well for anyone, on any world, in any story I have ever heard. The unit stepped closer. A thin beam of pale light extended from its chest and swept slowly across my body, starting at my feet and rising toward my head. As it passed over my legs, it paused. As it passed over my ribs, it paused again, longer this time. When it reached my left arm, it stopped completely, and I heard a small sound come from somewhere deep inside the machine, almost like an intake of breath, if a machine could take a breath at all. "Your bone density readings are inconsistent with baseline biology for your species," the unit said. "There are 17 distinct sites of skeletal repair. Several show signs of catastrophic trauma. Your nervous system carries scar patterns consistent with repeated severe injury. Your internal organs show evidence of regeneration far beyond what medical technology on file for your species should allow." I looked down at my own arm, at the pale line running from my elbow to my wrist, faded now, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. I had gotten that one when I was 19, working construction on a colony platform that was still being built out over open water. A support beam had come loose. I did not like to think about the rest of that story very often. "I've had some accidents," I said. I work in shipping and logistics. Before that I did a lot of manual labor. Things happen. Accidents, the unit repeated, and something in the way it said the word made it sound like it did not believe me, or perhaps like it believed me completely, and that was the actual problem. Your species file describes humans as having an average lifespan of 78 standard years, with moderate resilience and standard regenerative capacity. Your body does not match this description. Your body matches a pattern this station has only recorded a small number of times before, and never associated with a living subject standing in a customs line. The four-armed being near me finally moved, taking 2 slow steps backward, putting more distance between us. I noticed several others doing the same, quietly, without drawing attention to themselves, the way people back away from something they have decided might be contagious. I don't know what pattern you mean, I said, and that was true. I had no idea what was happening. I only knew that a machine was reading my body like a book, and finding chapters in it that even I had tried to forget. Please remain calm, the unit said, which is a phrase that has never once made anyone feel calm. You are not currently under suspicion of any crime. However, station protocol requires that any biological anomaly of this classification be escorted to a secure processing chamber for full evaluation before you may proceed further into Threshold Station. 2 more drones descended from the ceiling, joining the first 3, forming a tighter ring around me. I felt the air shift as their engines spun up. And if I refuse? I asked, mostly out of stubbornness, because some part of me did not like being surrounded, no matter how politely it was being done. You may refuse, the unit said. In which case you will be denied entry and returned to your ship under escort, and a flag will be placed on your travel record indicating an unresolved anomaly. This flag will follow you to every station and world within federated space for the remainder of your registered lifespan. I thought about my cargo agreement. I thought about the 6 months of travel it had taken to get here. I thought about my employer, who was expecting a signed contract within the week, and who was not going to be sympathetic to the explanation that I had been turned away from a space station because my bones were, apparently, wrong. Fine, I said. Take me to your processing chamber. Let's get this sorted out. The unit turned, and the ring of drones turned with it, and together they escorted me across the customs hall, past rows of frozen, staring travelers, toward a wide door set into the far wall. As we walked, I caught pieces of conversation in languages I did not speak, low and urgent, the kind of tone people use when they think you cannot understand them and are talking about you anyway. I did not need to understand the words to understand the feeling behind them. Fear. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that spreads through a room like cold water. The door slid open ahead of us, revealing a corridor lined with soft white light, and beyond it, another door, and beyond that, I assumed, whatever waited for me next. I walked forward because I did not see another option, flanked by machines that had, only minutes ago, decided that my own body was the most alarming thing they had scanned in longer than I wanted to think about. I glanced back once before the door closed behind me. The 4-armed traveler was still watching me, one hand pressed flat against their own chest, in a gesture I did not recognize but somehow understood anyway. It looked like the kind of gesture you make when you see something that frightens you, but also something you cannot look away from. The door sealed shut with a heavy, final sound, cutting off the customs hall and everyone in it. The corridor ahead was narrow and quiet, lit by strips of pale light set into the ceiling. My footsteps echoed against smooth metal floors. The drones stayed close, silent now, their red eyes fixed on me without blinking, because of course they did not blink. They had no reason to. How much further? I asked the tall unit walking beside me. We are almost there, it said. The chamber ahead contains specialized equipment. It has not been used in a significant amount of time. Why not? Because it was built for a different purpose, the unit said. It was built to identify survivors of a specific and extremely rare category of event. Until this morning, this station had never needed to use it. I did not like the sound of that at all, and I told it so. You should not be alarmed, the unit said, though its tone did not change even slightly to make that reassurance feel true. The equipment is not designed to cause harm. It is designed to ask questions. What kind of questions? The unit did not answer right away. We reached the second door, and it slid open ahead of us, revealing a round chamber beyond, dim and quiet, with a single chair positioned at its center beneath a ring of dark, waiting sensors. "You will understand shortly," the unit said, and gestured for me to step inside. I looked at the empty chair, and the ring of silent machinery above it, and the 5 drones still hovering at my back with nowhere left for me to go, and I stepped forward into the room, because there are moments in life when the only way out is straight through, and I had a strong feeling this was about to become one of them. The door slid shut behind me with the same heavy final sound as before, and I was alone in the chamber, with only the quiet hum of machines that had already decided there was something about me worth being afraid of. I sat down in the chair because it seemed easier than standing there waiting for something to make me. The moment my weight settled, the ring above me flickered to life, and thin bands of pale light unfolded from it, drifting down slowly, circling my head, my chest, my arms, without ever quite touching me. It felt less like being examined and more like being read, the way a person reads a page, searching for something specific hidden between the lines. A screen rose out of the floor in front of the chair, and text began scrolling across it in Galactic Common, faster than I could follow at first, columns of numbers and diagrams that meant nothing to me. Then, near the bottom of the screen, new words appeared, slower, deliberate, as though something on the other side wanted to make sure I actually read them. Processing. Cross-referencing anomaly with historical threat records. Please remain still. I sat as still as I could manage, watching my own scars glow faintly under the light of the ring above me, watching numbers rise and fall on a screen built by a species I had never met, in a station orbiting a star I did not know the name of, 6 months from home, further from anything familiar than I had ever been in my life. Whatever this machine was looking for, I had a growing feeling it was about to find it. The screen kept scrolling long after I expected it to stop. Numbers climbed, fell, climbed again. Diagrams of a human skeleton rotated slowly in the air above the projection, red marks blinking at each of my old injuries like tiny warning lights on a map of my own body. I had never seen myself laid out like that before, every break and repair labeled and dated by a machine that had never met me until an hour ago. A new voice spoke, different from the tall unit that had brought me here. This one came from everywhere at once, soft and layered, like several voices speaking in careful unison. Subject designation: Ethan Cole. Species: human. Age: 34 standard years. Processing anomaly detected. I heard that part already, I said, mostly to fill the silence, because sitting alone under a ring of quiet machinery was starting to wear on my nerves more than I wanted to admit. "You are addressing the Threshold Continuity Archive," the voice said, ignoring my comment entirely. This unit was constructed during the Long Silence, a period in this sector's history in which several inhabited systems experienced contact with an entity of catastrophic capability. This unit's function is to identify survivors of such contact and record their testimony for historical preservation. I sat with that for a moment, letting the words settle. "I don't know what the Long Silence is," I said carefully. "I've never heard of it. I'm not a survivor of anything you're describing. I promise you, I would remember meeting something like that." "Your physiological record disagrees," the archive said. "Bone density anomalies consistent with severe blunt trauma repeated across multiple sites and multiple time periods. Neural scarring consistent with extreme and prolonged stress exposure. Regenerative patterns inconsistent with standard medical intervention for a species of your classification. These markers match, with a confidence rating of 83%, the physiological profile of confirmed survivors on file." "Confirmed survivors of what, exactly?" I asked. "You keep saying entity and event and catastrophic like I'm supposed to already know what you mean." The chamber went quiet for a moment. The ring of light above me dimmed slightly, and then the archive spoke again, and this time its voice had changed, just slightly, into something that sounded almost careful, almost gentle, the way you might speak to someone you were about to tell bad news. "Have you faced a god and survived to tell it?" I laughed. I could not help it. It came out of me before I could stop it, a short, sharp sound that echoed strangely in the round chamber. "A god," I repeated. "No, I have not faced a god. I've had a rough life, sure. I've broken bones. I've had some accidents. But I have never met a god, because gods aren't real, at least not where I come from. This unit does not use the term God in a religious context, the archive said, and something about the flat, patient way it explained this made the hair on my arms stand up. The term is a classification used within this sector for entities that exceed conventional technological or biological understanding, entities capable of unmaking star systems, entities against which no known defense has proven reliably effective. This unit has recorded testimony from 11 confirmed survivors across 400 years of operation. You are the 12th candidate to match this profile. I think there's been a mistake, I said again, because it was the only thing I could think to say, and because some stubborn part of me still wanted this to be a mistake, wanted my life to be as ordinary as I had always believed it was. I'm just a shipping contractor. I move cargo between systems. I've had a hard life, but nothing like what you're describing, nothing that would unmake a star system. This unit does not claim that you personally have unmade a star system, the archive said. This unit asks only whether you have survived direct contact with such an entity and lived long enough afterward to carry the physical evidence of that survival within your own body. I thought about the construction accident on the colony platform. I thought about other things too, things I had spent years not thinking about, tucked away in the back of my mind where I kept everything I did not want to look at directly. None of it involved a god. None of it involved anything that could unmake a star system. It had all felt, at the time, painfully, mundanely human. Bad luck, bad timing, a body that kept getting hurt and kept, somehow, healing anyway. No, I said finally, firmly. Whatever you're looking for, I don't think it's me. I've never encountered anything like that. I don't even know what these entities of yours are supposed to look like. Understood, the archive said, though it did not sound entirely convinced. This unit will proceed with a full physiological history. Please describe, in your own words, the origin of each significant injury recorded in your scan. Begin with the earliest. The diagram above me rotated again, and a single mark near my left arm began to glow brighter than the rest, waiting for me to speak. I sat there for a long moment, looking at that small glowing point on a diagram of my own bones, and felt something strange settle over me, a feeling I did not have a name for yet. It was not fear, exactly. It was closer to the feeling of standing at the edge of a story I had lived through, but never actually told anyone, not all the way through, not from the beginning. Fine, I said quietly. You want the earliest one. I was 19. I was working construction on a colony platform, out over open water, on a world I'd rather not name because the company I worked for cut a lot of corners, and I'd rather not get anyone in trouble this far from home. Understood. Please continue. There was a support beam, I said. It wasn't secured the way it should have been. Nobody's fault, really, or maybe everybody's fault, in the way these things usually are. It came loose while I was working underneath it, checking a weld. I had about half a second to move. Did you move in time? Not entirely, I said, and my hand went, without meaning to the faded line on my arm, tracing it the way I had done 1,000 times without noticing I was doing it. It caught my arm instead of my head. I was in the water for a while after that, longer than I like to think about. There wasn't anything godlike about it. It was just an accident, on a platform that shouldn't have been built the way it was. This unit does not classify this event as contact with a god, the archive said, and I felt an odd flicker of relief at that, small and strange. This event is recorded as standard occupational trauma. However, this unit notes that your body's response to the injury, the speed and completeness of the regeneration that followed, does not match standard medical records for your species at that time and location. Please continue to the next recorded injury. The diagram shifted, and another point began to glow, this one near my ribs, and I felt my stomach tighten slightly, because I knew, without needing to look, exactly which story that one belonged to. That one's harder to explain quickly, I said. This unit has time, the archive said. This unit has had 400 years. I almost laughed again, but it came out more tired this time than amused. I looked up at the glowing point on the diagram, at the quiet ring of light still circling slowly above me, and thought about how strange it was that I had traveled 6 months across open space to sign a cargo contract, and instead found myself sitting in a chamber built to interview survivors of gods, being asked to explain my own body to a machine that had clearly seen things I could not begin to imagine. There was a research posting, I said slowly, choosing my words with more care now. Deep water again, different world this time, a lot further from any settled system. I wasn't there for construction that time. I was there because the pay was good, and I didn't ask enough questions about why. Please continue, the archive said, and the light above me brightened just slightly, as though it, too, were leaning in to listen. I told the story the way I had never told it to anyone before, not fully, not from beginning to end. I told it to a machine in a quiet round room on a station I had never heard of a week earlier, because there was nowhere else to put it, and because some part of me, the part that had carried these scars in silence for years, was almost relieved to finally say the words out loud. Outside the chamber, I would learn much later, the tall unit and its drones stood in the corridor, motionless, listening through the door, because word of what was happening inside that room had already begun to reach the rest of the station, faster than anyone, including me, could have predicted. The deep water posting, I explained, had been on a world called Corvale, far past the edge of settled space, a place with 2 moons and an ocean that covered almost the entire surface. The company that hired me was mapping the ocean floor for mineral deposits, and they needed people willing to spend long stretches inside pressure suits, far below the surface, doing work that most people considered too dangerous or too dull to bother with. I was neither smart enough to turn it down, nor experienced enough to know better, I told the archive. I was 22. I thought I was tougher than I actually was, the way most people that age do. Please continue, the archive said, and the ring of light above me pulsed gently with each word I spoke, as though it were recording not just my sentences, but the weight behind them. 6 weeks into that posting, our survey team found something on the ocean floor that was not on any of the mineral scans. It was not a rock formation. It was not a wreck. It was a shape, half buried in silt, far too regular to be natural, curved in ways that made my eyes want to slide off it rather than look directly at it. I remember the lead surveyor calling it in over the comm, his voice tight and strange, and I remember the silence that followed from the surface team, a silence that lasted just a little too long before anyone answered back. We were told to hold position and wait for instructions, I said. Nobody explained what we were looking at. I don't think anyone up top actually knew. Did instructions arrive? Eventually, we were told to retreat to the surface immediately and not to approach the object under any circumstances. I paused, remembering the exact texture of that moment, the cold press of water against the suit, the slow blinking light of a comm channel gone quiet. We started to retreat. That's when the water changed. Please clarify, the archive said. It's hard to explain if you've never felt it, I said. The water didn't move like water anymore. It felt thick, and it felt like it was paying attention to us, like it noticed we were leaving and didn't like it. 3 of the 6 divers on my team didn't make it back to the surface that day. I don't talk about the details of that, not because I'm protecting information, but because I genuinely don't remember all of it clearly. I remember pressure, and pain, and waking up on the surface deck 3 days later with half my ribs cracked and no memory of how I got there. Fortown. The chamber was quiet for a long moment after that. The diagram above me shifted slowly, the glowing point at my ribs pulsing in rhythm with something I could not see. This unit's records indicate that the world designated Corvale has been marked as a restricted contact zone since that incident, the archive said finally. 7 separate survey missions to that world have resulted in confirmed losses. Your survival and your ability to recall even partial testimony of direct proximity to the source entity places you within the confidence range this unit uses to classify contact survivors. I didn't fight anything, I said, more firmly this time, because I did not want the archive to mistake my story for some kind of victory. I didn't survive because I was strong or brave. I survived because the others pushed me toward the surface before they went under themselves, and because my suit held together long enough for me to make it up. That's not facing a god. That's luck, and other people being better than me in the moment that mattered. This unit does not require heroism as a qualifying factor, the archive said. Survival alone is sufficient. Please continue to the next injury. The diagram shifted again, and a new point began to glow, this one near the base of my skull, and I felt my jaw tighten before I had even decided to speak. That one isn't from an accident, I said quietly. That one's from a war. Please clarify which conflict. The Baylor Corridor dispute, I said. You probably don't have that on file. It was small, by galactic standards. Two colony governments fighting over shipping rights through a narrow stretch of space neither one of them actually needed. I wasn't a soldier by choice. I was drafted because I lived on the wrong colony at the wrong time, and because I was young and healthy, and exactly what they were looking for. Please continue. I told the archive about the 18 months I had spent in that conflict, careful with my words, leaving out the parts that were not mine to share, the names of people who had not made it home, the details that still visited me sometimes late at night, when the ship's engines were the only sound in the dark. I told it about the injury at the base of my skull, the one that had left me unable to speak clearly for almost a year afterward, the one the medics on my side had genuinely believed would end my life within the week. They gave me the standard treatment, I said, painkillers, a stabilizing brace, and orders not to expect much. I proved them wrong, though I want to be clear, that's not some special human trick. Plenty of people I served with didn't get the same chance I did. I don't know why my body held on when theirs didn't. I've thought about that question more than almost any other question in my life, and I still don't have an answer. The archive did not respond right away. When it finally spoke, its voice had shifted again, quieter, almost thoughtful. This unit has processed testimony from 11 other survivors across 4 centuries, it said. A pattern emerges consistently among them. None describe themselves as exceptional. All describe themselves, as you have, as ordinary individuals who simply did not stop, even when stopping would have been reasonable, even expected. This pattern has become, within this unit's classification structure, a defining characteristic of your species. I don't think that's special, I said. I think that's just what people do when they don't have another option. You keep going because the alternative is worse. This unit has recorded testimony from 412 other species during its period of operation, the archive said. Of these, only your species produces this specific response with such consistency. Most species, when faced with an unsurvivable event, either perish or survive through avoidance, retreat, or surrender of position. Your species appears to survive through continuation. This is, within this sector's historical record, considered remarkable. I sat with that for a while, not sure how to respond, because it was strange to hear something I had always considered a personal flaw, a stubbornness that had cost me more than it had ever given me, described instead as some kind of trait worth studying. There's one more, I said finally, quietly. The last one, the reason I'm here at all, working shipping contracts instead of construction or anything else. Please continue, the archive said, and the ring of light above me dimmed slightly, as though preparing itself, or preparing me, for whatever came next. After the war ended, I went back to construction work for a while, I said. I needed something with my hands, something simple. I took a posting on an orbital shipyard, helping assemble a new class of long-haul vessel. There was an accident during a hull pressure test. A section failed while I was inside, doing final inspection. I was pinned for almost 6 hours before rescue crews could reach me, and by the time they did, most people on the response team assumed they were recovering a body, not a person. You survived, the archive said, not quite a question. I survived, I confirmed. Barely, and not in a way that felt like winning anything. I spent almost a year in recovery after that. It's the reason I moved into shipping contracts instead of hands-on work. My employer needed someone with field experience who could handle the paperwork side instead, and I needed a job that wouldn't put me back inside a hull under pressure again. The diagram above me stopped rotating. Every glowing point on my body, every mark the scanner had found, pulsed once, together, in a slow, steady rhythm, and then went still. "This unit has completed its assessment," the archive said. "Your testimony has been recorded. Your physiological profile is confirmed to match the survivor classification with a revised confidence of 96%. "So what happens now?" I asked, and I realized, as I said it, that I was genuinely afraid of the answer, in a way I had not let myself feel throughout the entire examination. "Now," the archive said, "this station is required to notify the appropriate authorities of a confirmed contact survivor within its jurisdiction. This notification protocol has not been activated in over 140 years. "What authorities?" I asked, sitting up straighter in the chair. "What does that mean exactly?" The archive did not answer immediately. Instead, somewhere far above the chamber, deep in the structure of the station itself, I heard something that sounded almost like the beginning of an alarm, low and distant, entirely different from the sharp panic of the customs hall alarm I had heard hours earlier. This one sounded older, heavier, like a bell being rung for the first time in a very long while, somewhere deep in the bones of the station, waking something that had been sleeping for longer than I had been alive. The door to the chamber slid open before I had a chance to ask another question, and the tall silver unit stepped back inside, its single line of blue light glowing steadily along its faceless surface. "You are permitted to leave the chamber," it said. "Your status has been updated within the station registry." "Updated how?" I asked, standing slowly, my legs stiff from sitting so long under the ring of scanning light. "Am I in trouble? Is there a problem with my visa? I still have a cargo contract to sign, and I would really like to get back to that if at all possible." "You are not in trouble," the unit said. "However, your presence here is no longer a routine matter. Word of your classification has reached several parties within the station who have requested access to you." "What parties?" I asked, feeling the same uneasy tightness in my chest that I had felt back in the customs hall when the alarm had first gone off. "You will see," the unit said, which was not an answer at all, and it turned and led me back out through the corridor, the drones falling into formation around us once more, though something in the way they moved now felt different, less like guards escorting a suspect, and more like an honor formation surrounding someone important. The moment we stepped back into the main customs hall, I understood exactly what the unit had meant. The hall was no longer empty. It had been full of ordinary travelers when I left it, moving through their routines, waiting in lines, checking luggage. Now it was full of something else entirely. Dozens of beings stood gathered near the entrance to the corridor, spaced back in a loose half-circle, watching the door with the kind of stillness that comes from people trying very hard not to look like they are staring, and failing completely. There were the same pale blue, four-armed travelers I had seen earlier, but there were others too, species I had never encountered on my journey here. A group of tall, thin beings with skin like polished stone stood near the front, their long fingers folded together in front of them. Behind them, smaller creatures with wide, luminous eyes peered out from behind taller companions, whispering to each other in quiet, rapid tones. Near the edge of the crowd, a single figure in dark blue robes stood apart from the others, watching me with an intensity that made me want to look anywhere else. "Why is everyone staring at me?" I asked quietly, leaning toward the silver unit walking beside me. "News of a confirmed contact survivor travels quickly on stations with long institutional memory," it said. "Many species within federated space have historical records of loss connected to the entities this station classifies as gods. For most of these species, a living survivor is not simply a curiosity. It is, in many cultures, considered a significant event." "Significant how?" I asked, though some part of me was beginning to suspect I would not like the answer. "For some species, survival of such an encounter is treated as sacred," the unit said. "For others, it is treated as a warning worth studying closely. For nearly all of them, it is something they have never personally witnessed before." As we walked further into the hall, the crowd shifted, parting slightly to let us pass, but never fully looking away. I caught fragments of conversation in different languages, translated imperfectly through a small device clipped to my collar that I had almost forgotten I was wearing. The scan confirmed it. The readings were undeniable. I did not think their species capable of such resilience. 400 years, and this is only the 12th. I kept my eyes forward and my steps steady, though every part of me wanted to move faster, to get away from the weight of so many unfamiliar eyes. I had spent most of my life trying not to be noticed, trying to be the ordinary man, doing ordinary work, and here I was, apparently, the most interesting thing this station had seen in over a century. The figure in dark blue robes stepped forward from the crowd as we passed, moving with slow, deliberate grace, and raised one hand toward me, palm open, fingers spread. "May I speak with the survivor?" the figure asked, their voice carrying clearly across the now silent hall. The silver unit paused, and for a moment I thought it might refuse on my behalf, but instead it turned to me, waiting. "It's your choice," it said. "You are not required to speak with anyone you do not wish to." I looked at the figure standing before me, robes the color of deep water, eyes an unfamiliar shade of violet, watching me not with fear, the way most of the crowd seemed to, but with something closer to quiet reverence, and I found myself nodding before I had fully decided to. "I'll speak with them," I said, "but I'd appreciate it if the rest of the crowd could give us some space." The silver unit relayed something in a language I did not recognize, and slowly, reluctantly, the gathered crowd began to step back, opening a wider circle around us, though none of them left entirely. They simply watched from a greater distance, still unwilling to look away. "My name is Larissa," the robed figure said, lowering their hand and folding it back into their sleeve. "I am a scholar of the Vesic Concord. My people lost an entire settlement to an entity your station classifies as a god 3 centuries ago. I have studied the records of that loss for most of my life. I never expected to meet someone who had survived a similar encounter and lived to describe it. I'm not sure I did survive an encounter with anything like what you're describing," I said honestly. "From what the scanner explained to me, it sounds like my injuries match a pattern, but I never consciously faced anything I would call a god. I just had a hard life, full of bad luck and worse timing." Larissa studied me for a long moment, violet eyes moving slowly over my face, as though searching for something hidden there. "Perhaps that is the nature of survival," she said finally. "Perhaps those who face such things rarely recognize them for what they are, not while it is happening. Only afterward, when the pattern is laid bare by something outside yourself, does the shape of it become clear." I did not have an answer for that, so I said nothing, and we stood there together for a moment in silence, surrounded by a crowd that watched us both without a single sound. "May I ask you something else?" Larissa said. "Something more personal, if you will permit it." "You can ask," I said. "I can't promise I'll have a good answer." "Do you fear death?" she asked, and the question landed heavier than I expected, cutting through the noise of the crowd and the strangeness of the day, and settling directly into my chest. I thought about it honestly, the way I had never quite let myself think about it before, not out loud, not in front of anyone. I used to, I admitted, when I was younger. Every time something happened, every accident, every injury, I was terrified. I thought each one was going to be the last thing I ever felt. But somewhere along the way I think I stopped being afraid of dying, and started being afraid of stopping instead, of giving up before I had to. I don't know if that makes sense. "It makes a great deal of sense," Larissa said quietly. "It is, I believe, the exact quality that separates survivors from those who are lost. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear be the final word." Somewhere behind her, in the crowd, I noticed several other faces nodding slowly, as though her words had struck something true for them as well, something they had perhaps believed about my species, without ever having the chance to confirm it directly. "Thank you for speaking with me," Larissa said finally, stepping back and folding her hands once more. "I do not think you understand yet what your presence here means to many of us, but I suspect you are about to find out." Before I could ask what she meant by that, a new sound rippled through the crowd, spreading outward from the edge of the hall, near the wide viewing windows that looked out onto open space. It started as a murmur, then grew into something louder, sharper, closer to alarm than curiosity, and I turned to see what had caused it. Through the wide viewing windows, far beyond the edge of the station, a new shape had appeared against the dark backdrop of space, sleek and grey, unmistakably different in design from anything else docked at Threshold Station. It moved with a quiet, deliberate certainty, growing larger by the second as it approached, and even from this distance, even without knowing anything about its origin, I felt a strange, sudden certainty settle into my chest. I knew that ship. Not personally, not by name, not yet, but I recognized the shape of it, the unmistakable lines of a design I had seen only in old recruitment posters and half-remembered news broadcasts from years earlier. It was a human warship, and it was heading directly for this station, and judging by the sudden tension rippling through everyone around me, I was fairly certain I already knew exactly why it had come. The crowd around me shifted again, and this time the movement was not curiosity, it was something closer to concern, a ripple of unease passing from one being to the next, as more of them turned to look at the approaching ship through the viewing windows. "That is a human vessel," the silver unit said, its voice carrying a note I had not heard from it before, something that almost sounded like alarm, if a machine could feel such a thing. "It has entered the station's monitored perimeter without prior docking request." "I didn't call anyone," I said quickly, watching the ship grow larger against the dark of space. "I don't even know how anyone outside this station would know what happened to me today." "This unit did not report your status beyond Threshold Station's internal registry," the silver unit said. "However, certain classifications, once confirmed, trigger automatic notifications through channels beyond this station's direct control. It is possible your status as a confirmed contact survivor was flagged through a wider network before this station had the opportunity to manage the information privately." "Wider network meaning what, exactly?" I asked, watching the ship's outline sharpen as it drew closer, running lights blinking steadily along its hull. "This unit does not have full access to that information," it admitted, and something about a machine admitting the limits of its own knowledge unsettled me more than I expected. Around us, the murmuring crowd had grown louder, and I began to catch fragments of translated conversation again, faster this time, more anxious. Why would they send a warship for one survivor? Perhaps they fear he will be studied without consent. Or perhaps they know something about him that we do not. I did not like any of those theories, mostly because I had no way to confirm or deny any of them. I did not know why a human warship would be heading toward this station, and the not knowing sat uncomfortably in my chest alongside everything else the day had already handed me. Then, without warning, every screen in the customs hall flickered at once, station announcements and departure boards replaced instantly by a single message, displayed in dozens of languages simultaneously, scrolling across every surface in the room. "Threshold Station systems entering precautionary lockdown. Non-essential personnel, please proceed calmly to designated safe zones. This is a precautionary measure only." "Precautionary against what?" I asked, my voice rising slightly, despite my best effort to stay calm. The silver unit turned toward me fully, its faceless surface somehow conveying an expression I could not name. "This station's automated defense systems have cross-referenced the approaching vessel's design signature against historical records," it said. "The signature matches a classification this station has not encountered directly, but has recorded second-hand, from allied stations that experienced contact with human military vessels during and after what your species refers to as the Baylor Corridor dispute, and several subsequent conflicts." "I fought in that conflict," I said slowly. "I told the archive that already. Why would that matter now?" "It matters," the unit said, "because this station's automated systems are not reacting to you. They are reacting to the ship. Human military vessels, according to second-hand records shared throughout this sector, have a documented history of extreme persistence in situations their crews perceive as involving harm to their own people, even when no formal act of aggression has occurred. This station's systems are, in essence, treating the ship's approach with the same caution one might apply to a controlled but unpredictable natural event." I stared out through the viewing window at the approaching shape, sleek and quiet and utterly calm in its movement, nothing about it suggesting aggression at all, and yet the entire station around me was reacting as though something dangerous had entered the room. "It's not going to attack anyone," I said, more to reassure the crowd than because I had any real certainty of my own. I don't even know why it's here. Maybe it's not even connected to me at all. This unit finds that unlikely, the silver unit said, and as if in response to its words, a new voice crackled through the station's comm system, layered over the scrolling lockdown message on every screen in the hall. Threshold Station, this is the Federation vessel Meridian's Watch, requesting immediate docking clearance and confirmation of the status and safety of a human citizen currently registered within your customs processing system. Designation, Ethan Cole. My own name, spoken clearly through a comm channel by a voice I did not recognize, echoing across a customs hall full of strangers who had spent the last hour treating me like a walking historical event, was somehow the strangest moment of the entire day so far, and the day had already offered a great deal of competition for that title. The crowd turned toward me almost as one, dozens of eyes shifting from the approaching ship to my face and back again, and I felt heat rise in my own cheeks, half embarrassment and half something closer to fear, because I still had no idea who was on that ship, or why they had come looking for me specifically, by name, less than an hour after a scanning chamber had confirmed something about my body that I had never fully understood myself. "Do you wish to respond to the hail?" the silver unit asked. "Station protocol allows you to communicate directly with an approaching vessel if you are the named subject of their inquiry." "Yes," I said, before I could second-guess myself. "Please, connect me." A small holographic panel rose from the floor beside me, flickering to life with a soft blue glow, and a moment later, a voice came through, clearer now, warmer, and immediately, painfully familiar in a way that made my chest tighten before I had even fully processed why. "Ethan? Is that you? Please tell me that's actually you, and not some kind of registry error." I knew that voice. I had known it my entire life, long before either of us had ever left the world where we were born. Long before either of us had scars worth cataloging by an alien archive built to study survivors of gods. "Alice?" I said, my voice cracking slightly on the single syllable. "What are you doing here? How did you even know where I was?" "I command this ship," she said, and even through the strange distortion of the comm channel, I could hear the smile in her voice, tired and relieved all at once. "I've spent the last 3 years chasing rumors about a station out here with a working contact survivor archive. I never in a million years expected the flag to come back with my own brother's name attached to it." The crowd around me had gone completely silent, watching this exchange unfold with the same rapt attention they had given everything else that day, though I barely noticed them anymore, too caught up in the sudden, overwhelming relief of hearing a familiar voice in the middle of a day that had otherwise felt entirely unfamiliar from start to finish. "You could have just called," I said, half laughing, half something closer to tears I was not going to let myself shed in front of a crowd of strangers. "You didn't need to bring an entire warship. You're my brother, and you just got flagged as a confirmed God contact survivor on a station I've been trying to reach for months," Alice said. Trust me, the warship was the reasonable response. Behind me, I heard Larissa, the scholar in dark blue robes, speak quietly to someone beside her, her voice carrying just enough for the translation device on my collar to catch it. "This is the reputation," she murmured. "This is exactly what the old records describe. They do not send warriors, they send family." I did not fully understand what she meant by that in the moment, standing there in a crowded customs hall with my sister's voice crackling through a holographic panel, and half the station still watching me like I was something out of an old story come suddenly, unexpectedly, to life. But I would understand it soon enough, once the ship docked, once the records were finally opened in full, and once I learned exactly what my species had quietly survived long before I was ever born, and had never once bothered to explain to the rest of the galaxy. The lockdown lifted 20 minutes later, once Threshold Station confirmed the warship's intentions were exactly what Alice had claimed, a family matter rather than a military one. The screens across the customs hall returned to their normal displays, departure boards, and arrival times, replacing the earlier warning message, though the crowd that had gathered did not fully disperse. Most of them lingered near the edges of the hall, watching as the docking clamps engaged somewhere above us, watching the small viewport that would soon open to let my sister through. The silver unit stayed close beside me as we waited, and I found myself grateful for its steady, quiet presence after everything else the day had thrown at me. "This unit has a request," it said, as we watched the docking indicator slowly shift from red to amber. "With your permission, the Threshold Continuity Archive would like to access the full historical record your Federation maintains regarding human contact events. This station's records on your species are, admittedly, incomplete." "I don't know how much I can help with that," I said honestly. "I'm not a historian. I'm barely someone who reads the news back home." "Your sister commands a vessel with a name matching several records this unit has encountered secondhand," it said. "Meridian's watch has been referenced in at least 3 reports this unit has received from Allied stations over the past decade, always in connection with recovery operations following contact events. It is possible she holds information this unit has sought for a very long time." I did not have a chance to respond before the docking indicator turned green, and the viewport at the far end of the hall slid open with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. A moment later, my sister stepped through, and despite everything that had happened that day, despite the scars and the scanner and the crowd and the ship looming just outside the station, the sight of her was the first thing all day that felt completely, uncomplicatedly good. Alice looked older than I remembered, which made sense, since it had been almost 4 years since I had last seen her in person, back when she was still a lieutenant rather than a captain, back before either of us had scars that alien archives found worth cataloging. Her hair was shorter now, practical, and there was a new scar along her jaw that had not been there before, but her eyes were exactly the same, sharp and a little too knowing, the way they had always been since we were kids. "You look terrible," she said, crossing the hall toward me in quick, purposeful strides, and pulling me into a hug before I could even respond. "What happened to you?" The report I got said something about a level 5 biological anomaly. I nearly turned the ship around twice on the way here just to keep myself from panicking. "Apparently my bones have opinions," I said, hugging her back, feeling something in my chest finally loosen after hours of tension I had not fully let myself acknowledge. "Turns out this station keeps records on people who've survived contact with something called a god, and apparently, according to their scanner, I qualify." Alice pulled back slightly, studying my face, the way she used to when we were kids, and she suspected I was hiding something from our parents. "You've never told me the full story about Corvale," she said quietly, "or the shipyard accident. I always figured you were leaving things out." "I was," I admitted. "I wasn't trying to hide it from you specifically. I just never found a good way to talk about it. It always felt easier to let people assume I'd had a run of bad luck than to explain what actually happened." "That sounds about right for you," Alice said, and there was no judgment in her voice, only a kind of tired familiarity, the recognition of a pattern she had clearly seen in me for years without ever having the full picture to explain it. The silver unit stepped forward then, its faceless surface turning toward Alice with what I had come to recognize, over the course of the day, as careful attention. "Captain," it said, "this station's archive has recorded testimony from your brother today, confirming his status as a contact survivor. We would be grateful for any additional context your service records might provide, if you are willing to share them." Alice glanced at me first, as though checking whether I minded, and I nodded, because at this point, I did not see much reason to keep any of it private. Whatever this station's archive wanted to learn about my species, I figured it was better they learn it accurately, straight from someone who had spent her career dealing with exactly this kind of thing. "I can share what I'm authorized to share," Alice said, turning back to the unit. "Meridian's Watch is part of a division that handles recovery and support operations following contact events involving what your records classify as gods. We don't fight these things directly. Nobody does, not successfully, not that I've ever heard of. What we do is find survivors, when there are any, and help them get home. This unit has recorded only 11 prior survivors across 4 centuries of operation within this specific sector," the silver unit said. "Your division implies a broader pattern of such events across a wider area. Wider than you'd probably like to know," Alice said, and something in her tone had shifted, gone careful and measured, the voice of someone choosing her words with the precision of long practice. Humanity's had more contact events than most species care to admit publicly, partly because we don't advertise it, and partly because most of the galaxy assumes a species that survives contact with something like that must be either incredibly powerful or incredibly foolish, and we've never been eager to correct that assumption either way. Why would your species choose not to advertise such survival? The unit asked, and I found myself curious about the answer too, since it was a question I had never thought to ask myself, despite having lived the answer without realizing it. Alice glanced at me again before answering, and something passed between us in that look, an old, familiar understanding that went back further than either of our careers, back to a childhood spent on a colony world that had never been entirely safe, in a family that had never quite talked about the things that hurt the most. Because surviving something like that doesn't feel like winning, she said quietly. It feels like getting through something you shouldn't have. Most of the people who survive contact events don't want to be celebrated for it. They want to go home, get quiet jobs, and try to build ordinary lives out of whatever's left. That's exactly what my brother did, actually, without even fully understanding why he needed to. I felt something tighten in my throat at that, because she was right, in a way I had never quite put into words myself. I had spent years chasing ordinary work, ordinary routines, an ordinary life, without ever fully understanding that some part of me had been running from something, even if I could not have named what that something was until today. The silver unit was quiet for a long moment, its blue light dimming and brightening slowly, as though processing something far larger than a simple exchange of information. This unit believes it now understands why so few survivors have ever been formally recorded, it said finally. It is not merely rarity of survival. It is a pattern of quiet withdrawal afterward, a deliberate choice to disappear back into ordinary existence rather than seek recognition. That's about the size of it, Alice said. Most of us figure the scars are enough of a story. We don't need the rest of the galaxy retelling it for us. I looked between my sister and the silver unit, and then past them, toward the crowd still lingering at the edges of the customs hall, watching this entire exchange with the same quiet, careful attention they had shown all day, and I felt, for the first time since the alarm had first gone off hours earlier, something close to steady ground beneath me. Not because the day's strangeness had ended, but because I finally understood, at least a little better, exactly what kind of story I had been living without ever quite realizing it. 2 hours later, I sat in a small lounge near the docking bay, a cup of something warm and unfamiliar in my hands, while station staff finally processed my long-delayed cargo contract at a side terminal nearby. Alice sat across from me, still in her uniform, though she had finally relaxed enough to lean back in her chair instead of sitting at attention the way she had when she first stepped through the docking hatch. "You know this changes things," she said, watching me over the rim of her own cup. "Once a station logs a confirmed contact survivor, that information doesn't stay quiet. Other stations will hear about it. Other people will come looking, the way Larissa did today. You're not going to be able to go back to being completely anonymous." "I figured as much," I said, glancing toward the window, where the shape of Meridian's watch was still visible, docked steady and quiet against the dark of space. "I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. I spent a long time trying to be ordinary, trying not to be the guy people whisper about in customs lines." "You were never going to be ordinary," Alice said, not unkindly. "You just didn't know it yet. None of us do, most of the time. We just keep going, one day at a time, and somewhere along the way, other people start noticing the shape of what we've survived, even when we're too close to it to see it ourselves." I thought about the crowd in the customs hall, about Larissa's quiet, careful questions, about the silver unit and its 400 years of collected testimony, about the way an entire station had briefly gone still around me, simply because my bones told a story I had never fully understood. I thought about the scanner's question, the one that had started this entire strange, overwhelming day. "Have you faced a god, and survived to tell it?" I still was not sure I fully believed the answer was yes, not in the way the archive meant it, not in some grand mythic sense. But sitting there in that lounge, cup warm in my hands, sister across the table, ship waiting quietly outside the window, I understood something I had not understood that morning, standing frozen under a scanner that would not stop trembling. I had survived a great many things. Not because I was strong, not because I was chosen for anything, not because there was some grand design behind any of it. I had survived because I kept going, the way most people do, one day and one choice at a time, even when going was the harder option, even when stopping would have been so much easier. What happens now? I asked Alice. With the archive, I mean. Are they going to want more from me? Interviews, records, anything like that? Probably, she said. But that's your choice to make, not theirs. You can share as much or as little as you're comfortable with. That's always been true, even if it doesn't always feel that way in the moment. The silver unit appeared in the doorway of the lounge then, its blue light steady and calm, and it inclined its faceless head slightly toward us both, a gesture I had come to recognize, over the course of the day, as something close to respect. Your cargo contract has been finalized, it said. You are free to continue your journey whenever you are ready. This unit wishes to extend its gratitude for your testimony today. Your account will be preserved within the Threshold Continuity Archive, alongside the 11 others who came before you, a record for those who follow, should they ever need to understand what survival can look like. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it, more than I expected to. For what it's worth, I hope you never have to add a 13th name to that list. I hope whatever's out there causing all this stays far away from everyone from now on. This unit shares that hope, the silver unit said, though this unit has learned, across 4 centuries, that hope alone has rarely been sufficient. What has proven sufficient, time and again, is exactly what you demonstrated today. The refusal to stop, even when stopping would be reasonable. It withdrew from the doorway then, leaving Alice and me alone in the quiet lounge, the hum of the station steady around us, the warmth of the drink slowly fading in my hands. Come on, Alice said finally, standing and offering me her hand. Let's get you back to your ship. You've got a contract to deliver, and I've got a report to file that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows back home. I took her hand and stood, my legs still a little unsteady from the long, strange day behind me, and together we walked out of the lounge, back through the docking bay, past the last few curious onlookers who had lingered to catch a final glimpse of the survivor and the warship that had come for him. As we walked, I thought about the scars along my arm, my ribs, the base of my skull, each one a chapter in a story I had never fully told, not even to myself. I thought about the question that had started it all, the one the scanner had asked in that quiet round chamber, and I thought, finally, that I understood the answer well enough to carry it forward. I had not set out to face anything as grand as a god. I had simply lived and worked and kept going, through accidents and wars and moments that should have ended everything, because the alternative had never once felt like a real option. If that was what it meant to survive something the galaxy called divine, then I supposed I had done exactly that, without ever meaning to, and without ever needing anyone's permission to keep going afterward. Behind us, Threshold Station's lights glimmered steady against the dark, and ahead of us, my sister's ship waited, quiet and patient, ready to carry me back toward whatever came next. Whatever story the galaxy chose to tell about that day, about the man whose scars had triggered every alarm in the customs hall, I already knew the only version of it that actually mattered. I had kept going. That was the whole of it, and somehow, against every reasonable expectation, it had turned out to be enough.